All right. So with that, I would love to kick us off. Once again, welcome to the Stewardship Network's monthly webcast. My name is Rob Luzinski. So a little bit about us to begin. TSN is a 501c3 nonprofit organization with an award-winning 20-year history. We are now serving 20 plus place-based TSN member communities from the Great Lakes to the Pacific Ocean. And our free TSN webcasts happen on the second Wednesday of each month at the Eastern Time Zone's noon hour. Our mission is to connect, equip, and mobilize people and organizations to care for land and water in their communities. In order to connect, we take the specialized knowledge we've collected from and for TSN member communities, and we share it as widely as possible. We remove hurdles for TSN member communities so they can pour thousands of annual work hours into their ecosystems. And we mobilize through our TSN member communities. We make collaborative ecological stewardship accessible to all. And speaking of which, today is a very special day because we are kicking off our annual Spring Challenge. Spring Challenge 2024 will be running this year from April 10th to June 30th. We are so very excited to bring this great program back for another year. And so I would like to tell you a little bit about the history of this program and also how you can get involved. So through the years, the program was built to increase the impact and awareness of collaborative stewardship efforts, and we've been doing it since 2008. You may remember, if you've been with us for a long time, that it began as the Garlic Mustard Challenge, and then more recently it was the Spring Invasive Species Challenge, but we have since expanded the scope of the program, hence now being the Spring Challenge. The work is happening, we know that, but Spring Challenge asks us to unite and do whatever our role, we do more together. The value to participants like yourselves, some groups find it helpful for their data management, and some use the big group number to command attention for their partners and stakeholders. Some groups enjoy being celebrated on TSN social channels, and some just enjoy being a part of the initiative with other groups. Some individuals find inspiration in the spirit of it all, and some say it's how they got to know TSN and or participate in groups where they live. So we help to connect local member communities and also local organizations in general with interested volunteers that can then go out and do some great work and then report it, and we can all celebrate our successes together. All of it counts. So whether you are a volunteer or whether you are a professional steward doing your day-to-day work, we encourage you to report your hours to the TSN Spring Challenge. We are more than happy to take both volunteer and professional hours. Speaking of it all counts, we want to brag about a little bit of the great stats that all of you helped contribute to last year. So we had 50,817 total hours of stewardship reported. Absolutely incredible. We could not have done that without the 13,604 total participants, which was our highest single year ever. We are also very proud to say that the program generated over 1.6 million in work hour value poured into our local ecosystems. And to clarify, so the program, I shouldn't say generated, the program documented all of the amazing value that all of you contribute to local ecosystems in your communities. So we are so proud of those stats for this year, or for this past year, and we're excited to try to do even better this year. So in order to get involved, we encourage you to report early and often using our easy online form. That's stewardshipnetwork.org/spring. Hours remain our primary metric. So regardless of the different category that you choose to report in, different activities that you are reporting in the form, hours will be the consistent metric. And we will shout out your rolling do more achievements and honor those that do most at the end. I must at this point give a shout out to a couple of our winners from last year. So our Community Cup winner was the Huron Arbor Cluster. So congratulations. The Partner Cup winner last year was Milwaukee Riverkeeper. And the Solo Cup winners, it was shared between Whitney and Lisa Field. And those are just a few of the honors that we have as a part of the Spring Challenge. So we encourage you to get out there and report as much as you can and participate in the friendly competition aspect of the challenge. Based on some feedback that we got from last year's form, we've made a few improvements. So new to the reporting form this year, we are accepting multiple categories in one entry. So you can submit multiple different workdays of different categories in the same form submission. And we're also encouraging folks to directly upload your own files and formats if necessary. So if you have a spreadsheet that you're tracking your various workdays, you can upload that file straight to the form, and that'll make it maybe a little bit easier for you. We still encourage you to report early and often, as we say, because we love to update those numbers consistently throughout the challenge. And so, but if you have an accumulation of workdays in a spreadsheet, you are more than welcome to do so. And we're bringing back TSN Spring Challenge Boost this year. The program, or the aspect of the program, made a splash last year, and so we are bringing it back. We've got a bunch of great prizes for you to choose from, and winners generally are the ones that are submitting early and often. So you can submit, and on a weekly basis, we'll be choosing winners randomly selected from the folks that submitted in the previous week. And if you look at stewardshipnetwork.org/spring, you can see all of the examples of the great prizes that we have put together. And thank you so much to everybody, all of the partner organizations that contributed to those boosts. We simply could not have done it without you. Reporting opens today, so April 10th. Go out and tell your partners and your networks to visit stewardshipnetwork.org/spring. And we are so very excited to see all of the great work that everyone does this year. Again, April 10th to June 30th. And let's do more together. With that, I would love to introduce Jeff Masters, our webcast guest for this month, with Yale Climate Connections, Weather Underground, and NOOA Hurricane Hunters, and the presentation, Climate Change, Michigan, and the Bigger Picture. So Jeff, I would love to pass it to you now.
Okay, thanks very much, Rob. I'll get my screen going here. Okay, how are we looking there, Rob? Are we good?
That looks great. Take it away.
Okay. So yeah, as Rob summarized, I was the co-founder of the website Weather Underground, and now I work for the nonprofit Yale Climate Connections. And we're going to talk about climate change, how it's affecting Michigan, and the bigger picture, how it's affecting the whole world. And the talk is going to get fairly intense, and I urge you to hang on there. There'll be a rainbow at the end. So I went to U of M for a bachelor's, master's, and PhD in meteorology, and you can see me there in the Michigan Marching Band, so I'm a Wolverine through and through. For 4 years, I went and worked in Miami, Florida with the hurricane hunters and got to fly into several Category 5 hurricanes, including one that nearly killed me. You can read the story of that one at the link below there. And then I went back to PhD school after my stint with the hurricane hunters and helped develop this crazy website, Weather Underground, that then sold to the Weather Channel in 2012 and then IBM back in 2016. So let's dive right into climate change's impact on Michigan. And as you've all probably figured out by now, we're in a bit of a sweet spot here in the Great Lakes for climate change compared to the rest of the country. We've got a lot of water. It's relatively cool here compared to the south. And as far as our vulnerability goes, you can use this website to kind of give you a big picture of vulnerability. We're near average, maybe a little bit better than average compared to most states. And if you look at the number of billion-dollar disasters that occur in the US, this is actually a per capita sort of look at it. Michigan is one of the lowest sort of states that there is for billion-dollar disasters. Only Arizona, Nevada, and Utah seem to be lower. And certainly in the Midwest, over in the center part of the Midwest, they have a lot more severe weather than we do. The Great Lakes really act to moderate our climate, and we've been very fortunate with weather extremes in general. Now, there have been $3 billion disasters in Michigan history now. I'll go through them real quick. The first one was back in 1986 We had a huge flood. You can see those rainfall amounts in the center of the state, 10 plus inches over a 3-day period, caused a gigantic flood, 11 failed dams, and over $1 billion in damage. That is corrected via inflation to current dollars. The second billion-dollar disaster we had was a nationwide multi-billion-dollar disaster. It was the great drought and heat wave of the summer of 1988. So almost $2 billion in agricultural losses in Michigan from just crazy hot weather and drought that if you live through that, you'll never forget it. And then the third billion-dollar disaster, probably most of you who are Michiganders will remember, it was 10 years ago now. We had 3 to 6 inches of rain over just a few hour period over much of Metro Detroit. All the freeways flooded, and over $1 billion in damage occurred to the infrastructure. A lot of combined sewer overflows, just a tremendous mess. So that's it, just $3 billion disasters. I mean, you get that many in Florida in a single year sometimes. So Michigan's sitting pretty well for extreme weather events as far as high cost ones. So yeah, let's think about the future of billion-dollar weather disasters in Michigan. Flooding is the main concern. You can see here, going back to 1895, precipitation has been steadily increasing. We've got about 15% more precipitation falling now than 100 plus years ago, and that trend's going to continue to occur. Now, the reason that's happening is because we have a warmer climate. A warmer atmosphere can hold more water vapor, and that means you tend to get more rainfall in areas like Michigan, where we have a plentiful supply of low pressure systems that will act to wring out that moisture in the atmosphere. So when you do have that extra moisture in the atmosphere, it doesn't tend to fall, spread out over the entire year. It tends to concentrate in more extreme rainfall events, which of course means you've got more potential for flooding. Here we see over the past 60 or so years, there's been about a 45% increase in the heaviest precipitation events that occur over the Midwest. A little bit more in the Northeast, they're up around 60%. So when it rains, we tend to see, the rain coming down in more intense bursts, both in the summer and the winter and the spring. I mean, all the seasons it's affecting. And the ones we need to be concerned most about are the spring and summer. That's when we tend to get our biggest flood events here in Michigan. Here's just another way of looking at it, going back to 1900, showing the increase in 2-inch rainfall events. So these are averaged over 5-year bins. The two most recent 5-year periods have seen the largest number of intense precipitation events on record in Michigan. So, one of those years was 2014 when we saw that $1 billion disaster. So we are getting more intense precipitation events, but when it's not raining, we're also getting more intense dry periods. So this is something called weather whiplash, and it makes it harder to grow crops. When you've got a very wet period, then you're going to have to delay your planting, and it's going to cause trouble with agriculture. And conversely, when it's quite dry, then that can inhibit your growing of your crops. So growing crops in Michigan is going to get more challenging in the future due to this variability. This plot here is showing the number of changes from wet to dry occurring in the historical climate on the left graph, and then in the future expected climate on the right graph, just showing that, you're going to get more transitions from wet to dry and back again under the future climate, which makes sense. I mean, if you've got more heat in the atmosphere, heat is energy. That means that energy is there to supply whatever kinds of prevailing weather events are happening to be more extreme. When it happens to be dry, you're going to get hotter heat waves and more intense droughts. When you happen to get a rain-bearing low pressure system, well, that low pressure system is going to dump more intense rainfall. So we're going to see increases in both extremes, wet and dry. This is a plot for the entire country showing how the change in extreme rainfall events has occurred in the recent period and compared to the future climate too. So actually, this is actually what's observed, not forecast. So 100 years ago, a event that you could expect to occur once every 100 years is now occurring about once every 80 years in Michigan. And you can see we're doing quite well compared to, say, over the Northeast, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, where the return period for a 1 in 100 year rainfall event is more like once every 20 years. So you can expect that your extreme flood events may tend to follow suit, where a 1 in 100 year flood is now going to be only happening once every 20 years. Now, it's more complicated than that because a 1 in 100 year rainfall event doesn't necessarily happen to give you a 1 in 100 year flood, particularly if you have one of those dry periods that we're going to see more of. When it does get dry, your soils will tend to be drier going into the event, and you won't have as great a flood as you might have had in the past. So a very complicated picture of what we think is going to happen in the future with heavier precipitation events. Some places you'll get, factor 5 increase in your flood events. Some places maybe not so much because the soils will be drier going into it. So let's think about one of our more recent extreme weather events in Michigan. Back in 2020, we had a very heavy rainfall event in the center of the state, which caused several dam failures. The Sanford Dam and the Edenville Dam both failed, causing several $100 million in damage. And that was rated a 1 in 200 year rainfall event for the area. Now, you can see on the headline there, we've got over 1,000 dams in Michigan, and they're getting quite old. The average age is 79 years, and dams typically are built to only have a lifetime of about 50 years. So we're way beyond the safe age for a lot of dams, and we've got a lot of very high and significant hazard potential dams in the state. In fact, there's 6 at the highest category of risk at the high label. 3 of those are on the Huron River in Ann Arbor or Ypsilanti. One of those is scheduled to be taken out in Ypsilanti. They do have the money for it. I don't think work's begun on it yet, but it's interesting to look at the Army Corps of Engineers dam safety site if you want to find out what the risk is for your dam nearest you. And the money to fix these dams, we're doing pretty well to get one of those 3 dams, with funding right now to be fixed. The funding simply doesn't exist to fix all the dams, not only in Michigan, but nationwide. The infrastructure in this country has been rated a D or so by the Civil Engineer Society. And we need a lot more money to fix not only dams, but levees and, of course, bridges and highways and so on. The Infrastructure Act of a few years ago has helped with some of that, but we are falling far short of what is needed to get these issues under control. Here's a shot of the Edenville Dam actually failing back in 2020.
There it goes. There it goes.
So let's think about the Great Lakes now and their water levels. Remember how I was saying that both extremes of the climate we can expect to see more of in the future? Well, that's what's been happening to the Great Lakes water levels. We had record low water levels back in 2013 over most of the Great Lakes, but in 2020, just 7 years later, they were recording record highs. So another example of weather whiplash. We're getting very dry periods, which are some of the most intense we've seen on record, followed by very wet periods. And we expect to see, as the climate continues to warm, that pattern will continue. We will see more extreme Great Lake water levels. We're doing pretty well this year. Although Great Lakes, except for Erie, are near average right now, Erie is about 10 inches above average, not enough to cause significant erosion problems. So this is a scene from Lake Michigan back in 2020 when we saw houses sliding off into the lake. Several $100 million in damage from the very high water levels occurred that year along all the Great Lakes. With all the more extreme precipitation that's been going on, you're getting more potential problems with water quality because you can get more combined sewer overflows occurring, giving you more polluted water going into the lakes. But interestingly, the Great Lakes have not seen a big jump in increased beach closure days from things like E. coli and so on. I think part of that is a credit to, we have spent the money to make the sewer systems better in a lot of problematic areas. So that's a reflection of the investment we've made, which, is a good thing to be doing in an age of climate change. You got to make your infrastructure better. Now, one area where we have not done the work we need to improve our infrastructure is in the power infrastructure in Michigan. These are the power outages that have been observed since 2000 by state nationwide. Michigan's actually number 2 for most power outages, behind only Texas, which is a much bigger state. So per capita, Michigan's really got the worst power outage situation of just about any state. Now you might ask, well, maybe that's due to worsening climate. Well, the main thing that causes power outages are high winds from, severe storms. And if you look at the number of severe thunderstorm warnings that have been issued in Michigan in the past few decades, this goes back to about 1985, there has not been an increase. So from my eye, I don't see that an increase in severe weather, severe thunderstorms is happening in Michigan. Maybe there's been more ice storms that they're so uncommon that I don't really have any stats to show you on that. So my best estimation is that the reason for that terrible power grid failure pattern in Michigan is just because we've got a lousy grid. It's not being maintained very well. We need to put a lot more money into improving our electrical infrastructure in this state. And now I might mention in general, climate change, we don't really know how it's going to impact severe thunderstorms and tornadoes and so on. There is not yet a obvious change in the incidence of the number of tornadoes happening nationwide, although we are seeing a change in their seasonality and how far north they go. For instance, Gaylord got hit by a tornado a few years ago. That was the most intense tornado ever observed in the state so far north. Also, back in 2012, Dexter had a very powerful tornado. That was the earliest EF3 tornado recorded in the state. That was back in March. So seasonality and the range is changing, but the number and severity of tornadoes does not appear to be changing in Michigan. And we don't know how that's going to change in the future. It may well be that it'll be a nasty surprise, or maybe things will stay this way and we won't see a big boost in severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. Let's keep our fingers crossed on that one. Okay, so we've talked about rainfall, we've talked about severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. Let's talk about temperatures. So the Michigan average temperatures increased about 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit over the past century. The Great Lakes have been warming much quicker than that, 3 to 5 degrees since 1980. That is a huge change in temperature for that kind of an ecosystem. And it's really been problematic for a lot of aquatic species. For instance, the whitefish, which are the #1 commercial fish being taken out of the Great Lakes, particularly Michigan, Huron, and Superior, they do not do well in warmer temperatures, and they are suffering greatly from these increased water temperatures. So here's a plot by individual lake. what's been going on, you can see sharp upward trends in all of the Great Lakes here. Now, going along with those increase in lake water temperatures, you're seeing a drop off in extreme cold. So here for Detroit, it used to be back in 1970, on average, you get to about 10 below zero. And now it's closer to maybe only 1 below zero. This past winter, we managed to get down to, I think it was 5 below zero. So we did a little better than usual. But extreme cold is becoming more rare. Moreover, long cold spells are getting less long. So your change in longest cold streak is decreasing by about 8 days per year in Detroit. That goes back to 1970, that data. And snow is interesting. It's a little bit more variable than you might expect. Yeah, there's less snow happening at most stations in the US. About 64% of the stations in the US have seen a decrease in annual snowfall. But hey, look at this. The white dots show places where there's been an increase. So no general rule you can make about how snow is changing. Although if you look down further to our south, places like Missouri, Tennessee, Kentucky, they are almost universally seeing a decrease in snow in those areas. In Michigan, yeah, some places seeing an increase. And I think actually the Detroit area in general has been seeing an increase in annual snowfall. Now, the length of time that snow spends on the ground is lessening. So the length of the snow season, but you can still get heavy snow in a warmer climate. In fact, heavy snow is most common around 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you happen to have more 32-degree days, then you could see an increase in snowfall. And that's probably what's been occurring in the Detroit area. The climate has warmed so that the average temperature is 32 more often than it is 25. So you tend to get heavier snowfall if it's a little bit warmer. But, once that average temperature starts getting a lot warmer than 32, the snow is going to rapidly diminish as far as annual amounts. So we've got a longer growing season. If you look at the frost-free period in Detroit here, it's showing 29 days longer just in the last 50 years. 19 of those days are occurring in the fall end and 10 of those days in the spring end. So longer allergy season, we're seeing more pollen in the air. And guess what? Our friends the mosquitoes are celebrating that. 23 more days per year on average that are suitable for mosquitoes in Detroit area. Of course, the extreme heat is also increasing. You've got about 10 more days per year compared to 50 years ago where it gets above 85 degrees. So that increases your heat stress on vulnerable populations. So growing up, the climate that I have experienced in Michigan has shifted so that my weather that I used to have back in the 1960s is more like Ohio was. So going forward to 2100 or 2060, it's going to continue being a warmer and warmer climate. So about 35 years from now, we're going to be where Kentucky is now as far as climate goes. And by the end of the century, it's going to be like living in Georgia. So this is a powerful way to, display what your climate is and where it's headed. We're headed south as far as our climate goes. We're going to be Kentucky in the not too distant future. And this is just a moderate climate change scenario. I'm not even doing the most extreme one in this case here. So in the spring, we're going to get a lot more warm weather, which is going to help out the planting season. You'll be able to plant earlier. But we're also going to be seeing wetter springs, which is going to delay planting. So you've got these two competing effects. A warmer climate is good for, plants early in the spring, but a wetter makes it tougher to plant. And here's the change over the last 11 years in the the plant hardiness zone map. On the left is 2012, the right is 2023, just updated. Michigan has changed by about half a zone a lot of places. If you look in the lower peninsula, those blue areas on the left have disappeared a lot on the right-hand map, the 2023 map. The western UP, you see a big shrinkage of the purple areas. So that's going to continue to be a thing. We're going to warm our climate and change the zone hardiness map. Zone hardiness is primarily based on the cold temperatures in the winter, the coldest parts of the winter season. And winters are warming more than summers are in the Great Lakes. So this is a trend that's going to continue. So plants are going to be shifting in range because of this change in warmer winters. And as a U of M guy, my big concern about this is the spread of the Ohio buckeye tree. It's going to be moving north into Ann Arbor. This is a projection by the Forest Service. We're going to see that green circle where the buckeye is found now moving northwards into Ann Arbor, and that's going to suck. I mean, don't want to see that. Probably less humorously, maple syrup season is going to be a little bit trickier to do in the US. The range where maple syrup is going to be produced is going to move strongly northwards into Canada. Now, this is a extreme warming scenario, which we probably won't see quite this extreme, but it's going to get a lot harder to grow sugar maple trees in Michigan in the future warmer climate. Now, the amount of syrup that the trees are going to produce is going to stay the same in the sweet zone up in Canada, so we will just have to import it from up there. Now, agricultural crops may actually benefit from climate change in Michigan. Here's one modeling study showing that by 30, 40 years from now, maybe we'll see about a 10% increase in crop yields, things like soybean and corn and so on, which will take advantage of the warmer climate. And there'll be more carbon dioxide in the air, which plants do like. And the potential exists for a big boost in agriculture in Michigan. Now, they'll have to compete against a lot of other influences, though. This is just a weather climate sort of modeling scenario. It's not taking into account an increase in pests. We're going to see a lot more pest problems because a warmer climate favors increased broods and increased pest problems. Also, you might tend to get more fungus problems as well. So it also doesn't take into account increased climate variability, potentially delaying, when you can plant when it's wet, or, more weather whiplash going from wet to dry. Note also that in the southern part of the US, we're going to see some really significant drops in crop yields due to the warmer and potentially drier climate we're going to see. So Michigan's looking good for taking over the losses in agriculture that will occur farther to the south. If you happen to be a winter sports enthusiast, it's not looking good. The left graph there shows you the ratio of snow to rain. The yellow is about 50-50. So right now, winters, you tend to get half your precipitation as rain, half as snow. The plot on the right is showing that in an extreme climate change scenario, about 50 years from now, only 20% or so of your precipitation will fall as snow. We're also going to see less ice, so less ice fishing. And the Great Lakes have seen about a 20% drop in their peak coverage in the past 50 years. And the ice covers the lake for almost a month less than it used to. And I show an asterisk there for 2024 showing where we were for ice. It was the third lowest ice coverage on record. And there were a lot of days, and in fact, a lot of weeks when we had record lows in the ice coverage on the Great Lakes this winter. The warmest winter on record for the Great Lakes and for the country and for the whole world. So warmer climate is bad for algal blooms on Lake Erie, which we've seen a lot of late. The little satellite image on the upper right showing what one looked like a few years ago. But the severity of the algal blooms has not been increasing, but they are lasting longer. So that's a trend we should expect more of in the future, unless we get our act together and put more regulations in place to agriculture to stop putting so much phosphorus and nitrogen into the lakes. Not allowing fertilization of frozen fields would be a real big help. And we have to get on board with Ontario too, because they're a big source of runoff into Lake Erie as well. Warmer climate, we talked about pests. Lyme disease is spreading in the Midwest. This shows since 2000 how Lyme disease has increased in a bunch of states. Michigan is kind of that magenta color, a steady increase, but certainly not as bad as they're seeing in Wisconsin and Minnesota. We got other problems with pests. The emerald ash borer is liking the fact we're having less extreme winters. And the warmer climate is helping a lot of plants, invasive plants as well. I was reading in Bridge magazine today, lesser celandine loves a warmer climate, and it's getting to be a much bigger problem in Michigan now. It comes out a lot earlier in the year, in early spring, and tends to crowd out other plants. So a lot of problems with invasives are going to get worse in a warmer climate, and a wetter climate too. In the case of Lyme disease ticks, they like the wetter climate as well as the warmth. Something else we got to expect to see more of in the future is more wildfire smoke. Last summer was just horrendous. I've never had to plan my trips to property I have in the UP around wildfire smoke before. I mean, usually you need to worry about rain and heat, but I had to time my trips to see, okay, when are we going to get that next plume of wildfire coming off of those crazy fires in Quebec or Alberta? This is the AQI from the worst of those events in the red zone here above 150, unhealthy for everybody. And we're going to see a lot more wildfires in the future, not only coming, from Canada, but the Western US as well. And it's going to be a big health issue for us. I mean, we already get about 17,000 premature air pollution deaths per year in Michigan due to burning fossil fuels. So when we do finally get our act together and stop burning so many fossil fuels, that toll will go down. But we're going to see an increased toll from wildfire smoke. The projection is the US could see an additional 20,000 deaths per year because of wildfire smoke, say 30, 40 years from now, at a cost of $250 billion per year. So if you get nothing else out of this talk, take to heart my recommendation here. Invest in some HEPA units. You can build your own. There's a website called cleanaircrew.org, which tells you how to build your own, what they call Corsi Rosenthal boxes for about $50. That's a high efficiency furnace filter that you duct tape together and put a fan on. Or you can splurge and get a $150 commercial unit. We have both. And I like sitting on top of that HEPA unit. You can see I got a little handheld air quality meter that measures the PM 2.5 levels, which I bought over Amazon for about $70. And that was really handy for when I was going traveling in Michigan, trying to find, how is the air quality right now? Should I, extend my trip another day, or am I breathing gunk? And I recommend getting all three of these devices for yourself. So that's it for my Michigan part of my talk. Let's talk more about the big picture, and we'll look at the nation and the globe about what we expect to see with climate change. So climate change is a threat multiplier. It makes a lot of things worse. And I'll give you some examples here. War, pandemics, political instability, and inflation. Now, you've seen a lot of noise about inflation lately, and it's interesting. There's a paper that just came out today, or a study showing that 1/4 of the inflation that we experienced in the US over the past year or so was because of higher insurance costs, homeowners insurance. Why do you suppose that homeowners insurance rates have been going up? Well, it's because, in part, extreme weather events, particularly storms, rainstorms, hurricanes, and then we're also getting more wildfire events in California, driving up property insurance rates as well. What's another cause of inflation? Well, food prices. What's a big reason that food prices have increased? Well, extreme weather again. So extreme weather has been blamed for, droughts and floods that have affected food prices globally over the past few years. Another example I give there of why times are extra crazy is a rise of right-wing populism worldwide. That is driven a lot by immigration from other countries. And guess what's driving immigration? Well, it's complicated. I mean, there's war and political problems in a lot of countries, but drought has been a big driver of that sort of immigration. And I quote a study here in that lower part where Central American migration to the US has been driven by drought, which is linked to climate change. So when we're talking globally, I mean, you hear a lot about climate change affecting hurricanes, climate change affecting storms, and those get all the headlines, but it's really drought that we have to be most concerned with. Hey, because drought influences the two things we need to survive, food and water. And you can see on that lower left plot, the corn yield versus temperature. Corn grows very, very well at a wide range of temperatures up to about 25 Celsius. But once you get beyond that, there's a really steep drop off in your corn yields. So if in a warmer climate with drought, you are very vulnerable to bad harvests in a number of regions across the world. And we've seen actually a weather pattern we're quite concerned with the jet stream, where it locks in place and doesn't move, bringing intense heat waves and drought simultaneously to a bunch of different areas where you've got bread baskets that grow our crops we grow for the world population. And we've seen an increase in that weather pattern in recent years, which has been connected to climate change. And we will probably see more of that in the future. So an increase in drought due to both a hotter climate and due to this circulation change that's causing the jet stream to go bonkers is a problem that is of the highest concern to me when it comes to climate change. In the lower right there, you're seeing a graph of the number of droughts since 1970, and we are seeing a large increase in drought events. Food prices respond to major droughts. This is the food price index since 1961, corrected for inflation, showing a couple droughts in Russia that have caused spikes in food prices. Also, the pandemic caused a big spike in food prices, which fortunately we haven't seen maintained, and they've gone down a little bit. But you can see food prices are still very high now, historically, and we're all vulnerable to one of these major droughts again, causing a boost in food prices. And you can see on the bottom, I show you food riots that occurred in the Arab Spring revolts back in 2011. That was because of drought in Russia, which was connected to climate change, which helped cause that unrest. Lloyd's of London did some simulations last year where they gave some scenarios where global drought and other extreme weather events were projected to happen. And they gave a major, a severe, and extreme case for a worldwide situation of extreme weather that could cause 3 trillion, 6 trillion, or 18 trillion in damage over a 5-year period because of climate change induced mostly drought problems. So their major incidents, they said it has a 2.3% chance of occurring or per year, or 50% in 30 years, a $3 trillion event. So that's kind of where I'm thinking we've got to be most concerned. Drought affecting the globe, the global food growing system, causing this sort of shock. Now, I hate to be all gloom and doom, so I like to throw in a few cheerful-ish slides. Uh, we are seeing a separation in our GDP growth from emissions. I mean, it used to be that you had to burn more fossil fuels to get more GDP growth, and now that trend is not so great anymore. So that's a positive sign. Another positive sign is the cost of renewable energy has gone way down. Now solar is the cheapest energy in world history. Wind has also made great strides, and coal burning has gone way, way down. So a lot of good things are happening as far as we are making some progress in making climate change not as big a deal. But it's of great concern to me at the same time that we're seeing these big boosts in renewable energy, that the US is now producing more fossil fuels than at any other time in history and is the #1 exporter of any country right now. So yeah, we're making power cheaper, but we're still burning as much fossil fuel as ever. Carbon dioxide levels are still increasing as much as they ever have. So we have yet to see a meaningful decrease in global warming due to all these good things we're doing. Hasn't happened yet. And the concern is extreme weather for me. I mean, I get asked all the time, hey, we had a crazy weather this year. Is this the new normal? And I say, no, this is not the new normal. The weather is going to keep on getting more extreme until we stop emitting any fossil fuel sourced CO2 into the atmosphere. And that means under a very optimistic scenario, 2070 or 2080, these curves here I'm plotting show you kind of the different scenarios that they use in the climate world to determine, what the future might hold. So kind of a business as usual, maybe we'll be somewhere between the yellow and the orange lines. And if we really work hard to rein in our emissions, we'll follow one of those blue curves, which still means the weather will get more extreme until somewhere between 2060 and 2080. And I don't think those are realistic. I think maybe that yellow curve, by the end of the century, we could get close to zero emissions, and the weather will get more extreme through that entire period. So what's that going to mean for the economy? Well, sea level rise is going to be hugely destabilizing. There's a great book that just got published called On the Move, which I highly recommend, predicting that 13 million Americans will move from the coast due to sea level rise this century. And globally, sea level rise is going to be hugely expensive, maybe 14 trillion per year for a 3-foot sea level rise. And in the US, the big issue I see is coastal property is greatly overvalued because of the risks that we're seeing. And there's going to end up being a crash in the coastal property market, maybe on the order of 1/6 of a 2008 style crash that we had, due to the subprime mortgage crisis back 20 or so years ago, or 15 years ago. So this is kind of my summary slide here. Yeah, we're doing better. Renewable energy is cheaper, and we're doing some good things on climate. But the capitalism is unregulated. It's certainly not regulated well enough to rein in the climate crisis, and we're not making it sufficiently profitable to slay the climate change dragon. The magic of the marketplace will not solve the climate crisis. It has to be government intervention. And we're not going to see an orderly transition of our economy to, a new economy in balance with a new climate. It's happening too fast. There's too many things moving all at once. And there's going to be discontinuities. We're going to see partial collapses. We're going to see failures of the coastal property market, for instance. We're already seeing an insurance crisis in California and Florida and Louisiana and Texas, and that's going to metastasize to the rest of the country, I anticipate. We may only have a couple years where things seem, relatively normalish before uh, the nasty stuff hits the fan. So be prepared. I mean, I hate to be doom and gloom, but you really need to be prepared for what's going to happen. It's going to be an incredible crisis coming forward into the future. So prepare yourself. We're in good shape here in Michigan. If you want to invest in a climate hedge, buy property in Michigan. I mean, that's a great thing to be doing. Certainly, in some places in the world, like I give examples here, it's already been the apocalypse. I mean, Sudan and Syria, for instance, climate change linked droughts have made their society collapse. And I pose there at the question, what's going to happen in Mexico City this summer, where they're running out of water? Well, I imagine they'll muddle through, but 10 years from now, when the climate is still hotter, what's going to happen? It's going to be a big problem for a lot of megacities worldwide, and that's going to feed through to the rest of the global financial system. So hard times are coming. We're looking good here in Michigan, and we got to keep it going here and adjust to climate change as best we can. We got a lot better off than most places do. So as promised, here's my rainbow at the end, and give you a few links there for where you might go for information where I go for my information. And come to my website. I'm at yaleclimateconnections.org. I blog about extreme weather and climate change all the time, particularly when it comes to be hurricane season, which, it's right around the corner now. We're expecting a doozy. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rob, and feel free to email me there. There's my email address, weatherman.masters@gmail.
Thank you so very much, Jeff, and thank you to everybody that's contributing in the chat. I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels, a lot of complicated feelings and a lot of anxiety at this information, but it's important that we face the reality head on, and it's important that we remind ourselves of the things that we can do for ourselves and the people around us, and also for the world at large to be a part of the solution. So Jeff, I really, really appreciate it. This is really important information, and I'm seeing a lot of validation in the chat and appreciation for this talk. So briefly, we only have a couple minutes for questions, but I did want to touch on a couple of these. So one that Lisa from the Stewardship Network asked us. So the last time we had Jeff as a guest, we asked what on the horizon excites you in this field. She recalls that you may have mentioned drone technology last time, but asking that question to you again, what excites you in this field?
I think enhanced weathering is one that would be cool. Crushing up basalt rock, or maybe fine silt from glaciers and sprinkle it in farm fields. That will help sequester a lot of CO2 potentially, and also fertilize farm fields. So that's one mitigation aspect that I like. As far as renewable energy goes, it's really cool. Fervo Energy in Nevada has built a demonstration geothermal energy site, which basically pumps water down into the earth and lets it heat up, and it comes back to the surface. Really promising source of renewable energy. They've already got the demonstration plant, so that could be a big boost along with wind and solar.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So then let's look at maybe just one or two more questions. So there was a question about, do you have research about population movements due to climate change and the impacts of climate change on water use? And if not, do you have any resources that you would recommend on that subject?
As far as population goes, there's two great books that have come out. One is called On the Move, just came out last week. And last year, one called The Great Displacement. I think they're must-read books. You got to understand what's going to happen to the population. A lot of people are going to be moving, and Michigan is going to be getting a lot more people due to all these folks moving. As far as water issues go, the Pacific Institute has a great website talking about water issues. And the head of that institute, Peter Gleich, wrote a great book called The 3 Ages of Water, which I highly recommend to anyone wanting to understand climate change and water issues.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And with that, I think that's all the time we have for questions, but I encourage you to reach out to Jeff. His contact information is on this last slide, and also to check out the resources that Jeff has provided. So once again, Jeff, thank you very much for being a part of this today. We really, really appreciate you. And I'm going to go into our outro slides now for just a moment. All right. Oh, forgive me are you able to see my screen right now? Okay, great. Sorry, my computer was being a little finicky. Oops, I'm going to escape from that. Thank you all for your patience as I am figuring out my stuff. All right, here you go. So with that, wanted to encourage you all to become regulars at the webcast. So each and every second Wednesday of the month at the Eastern Time Zone's noon hour, we would love to have you join us. And so I'd like to go through a couple exciting upcoming presentations that we have. So mice, voles, beetles, and native plants, a tour of their responses to management at Nachusa Grasslands, Illinois. I hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly, with Catherine Hogan with Northern Illinois University. And then we have Minnesota Million Reforestation for Carbon Sequestration with Julie Ederson, University of Minnesota Duluth. And Growing Towards Equitable Urban Forest Stewardship with Christine Carmichael from Fair Forests Consulting. Once again, today is the big kickoff day for the Spring Challenge, so we encourage you to visit stewardshipnetwork.org/spring. Reporting form is now open. Get your data in there promptly to qualify for the boosts. And we love seeing your stories and photos. Please keep those coming. As we understand from the talk today and from this field in general, things can be challenging, things can be daunting, but I personally find hope in the shared fight that we all have for a better future together. And part of that is celebrating our successes and the efforts that we put in for a better future. So I hope that you all can join us in celebrating the great work that you do and supporting others that do that great work. Check this site for easy ways to help us spread the word as well as we're promoting the Spring Challenge. And with that, thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Once again, thank you, Jeff, for being a part of this talk with us. And I hope to see you again next month.